Hello, my name is Nadine and welcome to Hop Along Studio. So in today's video, I wanted to share with you some different ways you can use your embossing glazes, distress stains, and embossing ink through a stencil to make some really interesting backgrounds for your art journaling projects. So let's get started. So to start with, I am going to use the Crafter's Workshop stencil that I have with the Tim Holtz embossing ink and my foam to put embossing ink through this stencil. This particular stencil is a little hard to use a circular motion through just because of the fact that I can do it in certain areas, but because it is such a fine stencil with a lot of detail, to try to get a really good image, I'm finding that actually using more of a tapping motion is working out better for me to get a certain amount of distress ink down in a way that's going to be effective for this project. What makes this a little bit more difficult is that you can't just tape the stencil down because you are doing the entire page. So in this case, I think I might actually take some of my Emboss It dabber. Sometimes I use it as a dabber, sometimes I just like having a little bit of extra coverage for this. So I will put a little bit off camera and I'm just going to rub my ink dabbing tool into it and then I'm putting it down. This allows me to put on a lot more quicker instead of using my ink pad. Yes, it uses more embossing ink, but for me it's a better solution when I'm trying to move quickly. In this case, because I plan to put on quite a few different colors of embossing powder onto the surface, the more quickly I can get it down, the better sticking results I can get. Again, most of the Tim Holtz embossing ink does stay wet for quite a while. I just know I don't work very quickly. So I know I need to try to get this down as quickly as I can. So once that's down, the next step is to add the embossing powder. So the first thing I do is put my whole journal in a box. Might seem like a strange thing to do, but I find that it keeps things from getting completely messy on my surface. So I'm adding I have my little roses on here. It's probably hard to see on the camera, but I am throwing a little bit of tattered rose embossing powder into those spots. Instead of letting it go down the page, I'm flipping it over completely. So again, it only shows up in those small spots. So that's something to do. You don't have to always let your embossing powder go all the way down the page, but this is also where it's good to have a box and a piece of paper to work with like this so that you end up not having so much mess. So I'm now going to add in my fired brick. And this I actually want to get to all the edges of my flower. This is not a perfect technique in the sense of you're going to get perfect marks everywhere, but I think it's one of those things of it's close enough for me. And again, you can see had a little bit of red end up on the other areas, but overall it stayed in the area that I kind of wanted it to. And now I'm going to add some peeled paint. And I realized the one rose here ended up with a lot more green in it than I wanted to, so I'm going to try to go back in and see if I can get a little bit more of the red in there. I had kind of missed that the first time we were working on this. I'm going to crack pistachio now. So there you go. Basically, you've now put in all your different embossing powders on this. And again, you have to watch a little bit with cross-contamination with your distress powders. That's why I usually try to knock as much off as I can on the piece of paper that I'm using to pour the powders back in to try not to get too much cross-contamination. But actually on this, I really like that the color is there, but it is not really all that strongly just one color. And that's kind of the point of it. It's to give some loose colors, some loose design in here without actually being too worried about everything being perfectly within the lines. So the next thing I'm going to do with this is heat set it, and then I will come back and we'll go from there. After the embossing powder has been fully heated and set, it should be nice and smooth. And then you want to actually move on to adding distress stains to certain areas of this project. So I'm going to start by putting more emphasis on these roses. So I might start with a little bit of worn lipstick in the center. The reason I'm adding the distress stain straight on top is the fact that the embossing will resist the distress stain. And when it resists the distress stain, you can start getting some interesting looks with how you add color onto this background. By adding the distress stains, you can add a lot of color to this background without too much fuss, because again, because the embossing ink has already fully set. Now you can just add color in where you would like, and it's going to resist it so that you're able to actually get the color of the embossing glazes as well as adding additional color with the stains. So for a stencil like this that has roses and leaves and different background bits, this allows you to kind of add a little bit of variation to your background without having to color everything individually. And how I see this is basically looking at this as being like green foliage, and then I'm going to try to add some blue up here to show that it's not just all foliage, but there is some sky in there. It gives a sense of landscape. So that was using peeled paint, and I have some mowed lawn. And you can see that wherever I've been putting down stain, where there's the embossing, it just basically resists it. So again, you can really get a lot of color down really quickly without too much work and still end up with a really unique background. A little bit of cracked pistachio, but because I already have cracked pistachio powder, I don't think I necessarily want to add too much of that particular stain. Throwing some bundled sage on there, but that's a bit more muted than I would like it. So I'm going for a little bit more brilliant colors in here. I forgot what I said about adding the blue, so now I am actually going to try to add a little bit into a couple places. Again, it works well with the greens, so if anything, you end up getting the mix of the colors together to end up with something a little bit different. And then you want to let this fully air dry before you try to remove any of the color that is resisting, just so that you end up with a really strong color underneath and you don't wipe off what you've just put on. So now that this has had a chance to air dry a little bit, I'm going to take a paper towel and just wipe off some of the extra ink. This is maybe what you want to do is a little bit of spritz of water. It kind of helps it come up a little bit better and come off a little bit better, because again, the distress inks and distress stains do resist, and because they do react to water, this makes it just a little bit easier to clean up what you've been working on. And there you are, a really quick, interesting background that didn't take too much time or too much effort to accomplish. So I wanted to leave you with a completed project. So things that you can do with this. I'm going to actually put a little phrase on this page, and that's going to be enough for me. I think this background is interesting enough on its own, and sometimes I realize how much I add layer on layer on layer on layer on some of my pages, and that sometimes is a more simplistic way of going about things is sometimes better. So I was thinking a lot about the idea of worthiness. I was reading Brene Brown's book, Daring Greatly, and it made me think a lot about the idea of the ways where we can dare greatly in our lives. And some of that is also realizing that we need to treat ourselves with the respect of knowing that we are worthy and we are enough. I think sometimes in our lives we can spend so much time worrying about what other people think of us. We can worry about how we fit into things, that sometimes we don't allow ourselves to come to a situation from a place of worthiness. Instead, we come into a place where we feel like we need to prove that we're worthy, that we are valuable, and we are already valuable. This is the thing. It's like if we are all valuable as people, and so instead of sitting in a place where you're feeling like you have to justify why you're there or why you should be included, instead it's realizing that you already are included. You already are valuable. You know, I think the world out there can be kind of harsh to us and to our self-esteem and who we are, and we can spend so much time second-guessing who we are instead of just being who we need to be, doing what we need to do what we feel led to do, and not worry about the rest. And some of that comes with time. Some of it's just giving yourself the place where you can see yourself as worthy and seeing yourself as valuable, and not letting other people undermine that. There's a period in my life that I did let a lot of people undermine how I saw my personal worth. And that was about what I succeeded at and what I accomplished, and if I was a success. Did I have the right car? Was I wearing the right clothes? Was I doing the right things? And realizing that all of it was nonsense. That being worthy and being enough is kind of whatever we choose. What do we see as success? You know, for me, success for me was making the choice to leave a corporate job. It was choosing to be enough just the way I am. And I know a lot of people would look at that and go, well, I'm not accomplishing as much as I could. Yeah, I know. I could be in a place where I could be making a ton of money and with a ton of stress. And to be honest, it's not the life I'm willing to live anymore. And because I'm choosing not to live it, I know a lot of people judge me for it, but I kind of don't care, because at some point we need to decide who matters and what matters. And having a good relationship with my husband and having good friendships and being present over being stressed out and working 80-hour weeks, I think is totally worth it. And so I'm choosing to be enough in my own life, and I'm choosing to be worthy in my own life, no matter what anyone says. The one thing you need to be aware of when you're using embossing on some of these pages is that you're not going to be able to use any sort of dye-based marker on this. You're going to have to use something that's going to be able to work on any sort of surface. So probably something like a Pitt pen or some sort of other sort of permanent pen that is going to be able to stick to this surface. This works pretty well for actually getting your stickers to stick. It's always good to try to place them and mess with them a little bit before permanently putting them down, just so that you make sure that you're really happy with your final result. And if you haven't read Brene Brown's book, Daring Greatly, it's definitely one that I think everyone should read at least once in their lives. It talks a lot about some important topics about shame, about accepting ourselves, about the lies that we tell ourselves. It talks a lot about perfectionism and even like how hard we are on ourselves as people, and how that can be really damaging to kind of how we view the world and even how we view others. And there's something really important about taking the time to really understand what's going on with us and how we are reacting to things. So instead of living in a place of always reacting, instead we can really understand what triggers our reactions, and understanding how we can become better and maybe more balanced in our reaction than maybe we have been in the past. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, if you could like it, subscribe to my channel and click the notification so you don't miss out on any future videos. As well, I have my website, hopalongstudio.com, where I have a lot of other art videos and other ideas on how to work towards being in a mentally well place in your personal life, I would love for you to check it out. If you have any questions or comments or would like any ideas on new things you can do in these videos, please contact me. I would love to hear what you have to say, and I would love to get your suggestions on what you would like to learn. I hope that you have a really great week, and I will see you next time.